Welcome to this channel, dear friends of mystery. Tonight's tale begins, as so many intriguing stories do, upon a railway platform, Charing Cross, on a mild September evening. A woman in grey lingers there, her eyes darting over her shoulder as though a shadow follows close behind. Within days, Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings find themselves drawn into the unsettling secrets of Greyborn Court, where whispers of a double life, a dangerous impersonation, and a troubling signature point toward a design as patient as it is cruel. This is The Silent Signature, a story written in tribute to the spirit of Agatha Christie, though crafted entirely anew for you. Before we turn the page, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from tonight? I always take joy in seeing this community light up across the globe. Creating these mysteries, writing, narration, and illustration takes many hours, and your support keeps this journey alive. You can join our membership for ad-free listening and exclusive stories, or leave a small tip if you wish. But know this: by simply listening, sharing, and leaving a comment below, you're already helping more than you realize. Now, settle in. The shadows lengthen, the stage is set, and the silent signature awaits. Chapter 1. The Lady on the Platform. If my years in the company of Hercule Poirot have taught me anything, it is that life's most perplexing cases often arrive quietly, without the flourish one might expect. They slip into view through a fleeting glance, a misplaced word, or the peculiar bearing of a stranger glimpsed in passing. Such was the case on a soft September evening in 1928, when we found ourselves at Charing Cross Station, having just concluded a small but satisfying matter in Devon: the curious disappearance of a set of black pearls, which Poirot, no doubt, would later christen in his meticulous notes. The station was alive with its usual evening chorus, the hiss of steam drifting from locomotives, the shuffle of weary commuters, the mingling scents of smoke and hot iron. Poirot, pristine in his grey suit and bowler, consulted his watch with satisfaction and announced that we had 20 minutes before our connection to Folkestone. His doctor had prescribed a seaside holiday, ostensibly for his nerves, though I strongly suspected Poirot relished more the sea air than the thick London fog. It was then that I noticed her. A young woman lingered near the bookstall, standing half in shadow beneath a large advertisement for Pear's soap. At first glance, nothing about her seemed remarkable. Perhaps 23 or so, dressed plainly in a traveling costume of grey serge. Yet something in her demeanor caught my attention. Each time a passerby brushed close, she recoiled ever so slightly, as though bracing against an unseen blow. Her glances darted restlessly over her shoulder, and she clutched a small reticule to her chest with a desperation that betrayed more than mere habit. Her appearance carried contradictions that did not escape Poirot's notice. Though her coat and skirt were modest, her shoes were of fine kid leather, well made and clearly from a better station in life. Her gloves mismatched, one buttoned, the other missing, and her hat tipped at an odd angle, as though donned in haste. "Mon ami," came Poirot's voice at my shoulder, "you look as though you have sighted a stag in the forest." I gestured towards the woman. "That girl, she seems unusually anxious." Poirot's head inclined with feline precision, his green eyes sharp. "Tiens, Hastings, you observe correctly, though I think her condition is more grave than simple anxiety. Regard her complexion, pale beneath the powder. See how she hesitates with every step, as if pulled between advancing and retreating. And those details, expensive shoes, yet a gown of modest quality. A woman once accustomed to luxury, now fallen upon diminished means. Clearly, she hides something." "Really, Poirot," I chuckled, "you make her sound like the heroine of some tragic romance." He smiled faintly. Perhaps she is. And perhaps, Hastings, this novel has not yet reached its final page. As though aware of our scrutiny, the young woman lifted her gaze. For an instant her grey eyes locked with mine, wide, troubled, filled with an appeal I could not define. She parted her lips as though to speak, but her expression changed suddenly. The blood drained from her cheeks, and she stared past my shoulder with a look of pure dread. I spun around, but the crowd was a blur of ordinary travelers, clerks, porters, and ladies with their parcels. No figure stood out. When I turned back, she was already in motion, striding swiftly down the platform. Without baggage, she slipped into a second-class carriage of a waiting train and vanished from sight. Poirot watched her departure with narrowed eyes, his fingertips brushing the edge of his moustache. She is afraid, Hastings. Of that, there is no doubt. Should we follow her? I asked eagerly. He shook his head with serene finality. Non, mon ami. One does not chase the butterfly. If it is destined, it will return. Besides, he tapped his temple lightly. Her image is now recorded here. Should our paths cross again, I will know her instantly. The moment might have passed into the fog of memory, had not a week later Mrs. Pearson, our landlady at Whitehaven Mansions, entered the breakfast room with unusual urgency. "A young lady to see you, sir," she announced, her eyes full of curiosity. "Looks quite worn out, and insists it is important." Poirot's lips curved in a knowing smile. "Show her in, if you please, madame." The door opened, and there she stood, the same young woman from the platform. Gone was her hat, her dark hair somewhat disordered, a smudge of dust upon her cheek as though she had travelled far and fast. She stepped forward, her hands trembling, and spoke in a voice taut with fear. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "my name is Alice Harkort. I have come to beg for your help, for I believe my life is in grave danger." Chapter 2. The Confession of Miss Harkort. It is a rare thing to see Hercule Poirot abandon his customary poise, but the reappearance of the mysterious lady in grey brought a glimmer of boyish anticipation to his sharp eyes. He leaned forward slightly, steepling his fingertips as Mrs. Pearson ushered her into our sitting room. "Pray, mademoiselle, take a seat," Poirot said gently, gesturing to the armchair opposite his desk. "You are exhausted. A tisane, perhaps? Hastings, be so good as to summon some hot water." Miss Harkort shook her head swiftly. "No, thank you. I have not much time." Her words came in hurried bursts, as though even this conversation might be cutting short her chance at survival. Poirot's gaze steadied on her, his voice soothing. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle. Here you are safe. We have all the time that is needed. Begin at the beginning, if you please." She cast an anxious glance toward the window before gathering her courage. "You saw me last week at Charing Cross Station. I had intended to speak then, but—" She faltered, her eyes widening with remembered fear. "I was being followed." "Followed?" I asked, unable to keep the alarm from my tone. "Yes, a man, tall, thin, with a peculiar limp. He has shadowed me for weeks. I glimpse him in the streets, sometimes." She shuddered, lowering her voice. "Sometimes I wake certain that he is inside the house." Poirot regarded her solemnly, as though she had described nothing more unusual than a change in the weather. And the reason for such an unwelcome companion? A wan smile flickered across her lips, then died. "I am, or rather I was, the ward of Sir Charles Harcourt, of Greyborn Court in Kent. My parents died when I was a child, and he became my guardian. I always believed he intended me to inherit some portion of his estate. That belief has changed." Poirot's brows arched. "Ah, until recently." Her voice grew steadier, 3 months ago, Sir Charles announced my engagement to his godson, Leonard Westridge. I had no say in the matter. An arranged marriage? In England? I said, unable to mask my surprise. Not in the strictest sense, she admitted. Leonard is charming, yes, even handsome, but I have since learned things of his debts, his associations, his temper. It unsettles me. When I refused, Sir Charles was furious, and then came the letter. She hesitated before adding, unsigned. A warning. Think again, or your life depends on it. I gasped, but Poirot remained still, his green eyes studying her with unfathomable patience. And then, mademoiselle? What happened next was stranger still. One evening, returning from the village, I encountered a woman waiting by the hedgerow. She wore a coarse cloak, her face half hidden, but when she lowered her scarf, Miss Harkort's voice quavered. Monsieur Poirot, it was my own face I saw, my very reflection staring back at me. I could not help blurting out, surely you mean a twin. Her head shook with desperate certainty. No twin, no sisters at all. And yet she was my height, my age, with my very features. For a moment I thought I had stepped into some terrible dream. What did she do? Poirot asked quietly. She pressed a scrap of paper into my hand and whispered, They will call me Alice Harkort. Do not let them. Protect yourself. And then she fled before I could question her. Miss Harkort drew from her reticule a much-folded note, which Poirot lifted delicately between his fingers. The scrawled message, written hastily, read, Beware of Leonard Westridge. They mean to lock you away. Poirot tapped the paper thoughtfully. Voila, a most singular business indeed. I could scarcely contain myself. It's obvious, Poirot. Someone means to impersonate her and seize her inheritance. It's a plot right out of a melodrama. Miss Harkort's hands tightened in her lap. That is precisely what I fear, Captain Hastings, and if I am right, they will have to remove me to succeed. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, weighing her words. And so, naturally, you have come to me. Yes, she whispered. I have heard you are the one man in England who can uncover the truth when all else seems hopeless. Poirot's expression softened into a smile. Mademoiselle, you do me great honor. You were wise to come. We must go at once to Greyborn Court. When? I asked, astonished by his decisiveness. Tomorrow morning, mon ami. There is no time to lose. If there is indeed a scheme of substitution at work, the machinery may already be in motion. His words hung in the air, the gravity of them striking me as deeply as they did our frightened visitor. Chapter 3. Greyborn Court. Greyborn Court greeted us with the solemn dignity of a house steeped in age and memory. Its oak-panelled halls, heavy with portraits of ancestors who seemed to watch our every step, carried the quiet weight of family pride, and perhaps a touch of unease. Waiting at the threshold was Sir Charles Harkort, tall and spare, his bearing upright, but his face lined with the marks of old cares. My dear Alice, he said warmly, clasping his ward's hands as though she had been gone a decade. You have given us all quite the fright. London is hardly the place for a young woman to wander unattended. Alice murmured a response, but his eyes had already fixed upon us. Poirot bowed politely, introducing himself with his customary flourish. Hercule Poirot at your service, and my companion, Captain Hastings. Sir Charles inclined his head with cool courtesy. Yes, I have heard your name spoken, Monsieur Poirot. Even in this quiet corner of Kent, one hears of your methods. But forgive me if I speak plainly, what passes within this household is a private matter. My ward has, I fear, let her imagination take dangerous liberties. I saw Alice's shoulders stiffen, but Poirot merely twirled the end of his moustache, his tone light. Imagination, Sir Charles, is very often the herald of truth. The old gentleman did not argue further. He dismissed Alice gently with words of concern for her rest, though his meaning was unmistakable. Outsiders were not welcome here. We had not been standing long before the arrival of Leonard Westridge. He entered as though Greyborn itself belonged to him, his step brisk, his smile rehearsed. "Alice, my dear," he exclaimed, seizing her hand with such confidence that my blood rose in indignation. "How good it is to see you home again. You must admit, Sir Charles, she looks herself once more, healthier already." Alice withdrew her hand coldly. "I did not leave because of my health, Leonard." "Then some trivial alarm, no doubt," he replied with an indulgent smile. "A shadow glimpsed where none existed, a letter slipped by some mischief maker. Country nerves are easily disturbed." "Enough," Sir Charles said firmly. "Your cousin has been unsettled, Leonard. Let that be the end of it." At that moment, Lady Frances Harkort drifted into the room with the grace of someone who never hurried. Draped in pale silks, she looked less like a hostess and more like an ornament set deliberately in place. "Why, Charles, you did not tell me Alice had returned, and with visitors. Monsieur Poirot, is it not?" She extended her hand faintly, her smile touched with irony. "One hears your name everywhere. I trust Alice has not troubled you with her fancies." Poirot bowed gallantly. "Madame, what some call fancy may at times conceal a truth most profound." Her brows lifted, faintly amused. "How very continental of you." Dinner was served soon after, and Greyborn Court displayed its grandeur with polished silver, gleaming crystal, and servants who moved with the solemn air of ritual. Sir Charles presided at the head of the long table as though every dish placed before us was a testament to order and tradition. The talk was polite, but carefully hollow. Remarks about the harvest, small inquiries about our journey, an observation or two about Belgium, meant for Poirot. Leonard filled the silences with eager chatter about racing and politics, but Alice's responses were measured and distant, her eyes betraying thoughts she dared not speak. Lady Frances contributed little, save for the occasional languid comment delivered like the lifting of a fan. It was Leonard who eventually broke the veneer. "You will be glad when matters are settled, Alice. Prolonged uncertainty cannot suit you." Alice's cheeks flushed with sudden fire. "I have told you, Leonard, there is nothing to settle." Sir Charles placed his knife down with careful precision. "That is enough." His tone left no room for reply, and Alice fell silent, though her eyes flashed with indignation. Poirot, who had been examining his wine-glass as if divining secrets in the red liquid, spoke softly. "Pardon, Sir Charles, but one cannot fail to observe that Mademoiselle is troubled. Rest, yes, but sometimes silence and restraint are the very soil in which danger grows." Sir Charles's reply was measured. "Monsieur, I value your concern, but as her guardian, I must choose what is best. A quiet life at Greyborn will do more for her than inquiries which may lead nowhere." Poirot inclined his head politely, but I knew that expression well. He was already considering his next move. When Poirot seemed to yield, he was almost always preparing to strike. Later, we gathered in the drawing room. A great fire flickered beneath the carved mantel, throwing restless shadows across the portraits above. Lady Frances lounged on a chaise, her attention fixed upon a novel. Leonard leaned against the fireplace with practiced ease. Alice sat by the flames, silent and withdrawn. Sir Charles, as ever, stood in patriarchal command, one hand resting on the mantelpiece. It was into this tableau that Mrs. Withers, the housekeeper, entered carrying a tray of tea. Her expression, usually stern and unflappable, changed abruptly as her eyes fell on Alice. With a small cry, she nearly dropped the tray. "Miss Alice, how did you contrive to arrive before me?" Alice looked up in bewilderment. "What do you mean, Mrs. Withers? I have been here since dinner." The housekeeper's voice wavered, but her conviction did not. "I saw you upstairs not 10 minutes ago. You were by the window in your chamber in your grey dress, looking down into the gardens. I spoke, but you gave no reply." The room fell silent. Alice rose slowly, her face pale. "I have not left this chair all evening." "Nonsense," Sir Charles said firmly. "Mrs. Withers, you are mistaken. My niece has not moved from this room." "With respect, sir," the housekeeper answered, her hands trembling, "I know Miss Alice's face as well as my own. If it was not she, then it was—" She stopped abruptly, colour draining from her cheeks. Leonard gave a short, careless laugh. The tricks of an old house, shadows, reflections. Greyborn loves its mischief. Lady Frances, without lifting her eyes from her book, murmured, "How charming! At last, a household ghost." "That will suffice," Sir Charles cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. But Poirot set down his spoon with delicate precision, his gaze intent. "No, my friend, this is of importance, for if another walks these halls in the likeness of Mademoiselle, then we do not speak of shadows, but of danger already within your walls." A hush fell. The ticking of the mantel clock seemed thunderous in the silence. Even I, who had scoffed at such talk before, felt the oppressive weight of Greyborn Court pressing in, as though its very stones were listening. Chapter 4. Private Conversations. Morning broke with a clear, pale light, the mist lingering over the lawns of Greyborn Court like a veil reluctant to lift. Yet for all its beauty, the great house seemed less like a home to me and more like a fortress, each of its inhabitants hiding carefully behind walls of courtesy and silence. After breakfast, Sir Charles requested Poirot's company in the library, and though I followed, I sensed that my presence was endured rather than welcomed. The room suited him perfectly. Shelves of sober legal tomes, the faint smell of leather bindings and pipe smoke, and a tall carved mantelpiece that seemed to frame his authority. "Monsieur Poirot," he began gravely, standing with his hands behind his back, "let us speak plainly. My ward has chosen to place her trust in you, and I cannot question your motives. But I must warn you, Alice is young, impressionable, and prone to fanciful imaginings. It is essential that such notions are not encouraged." Poirot inclined his head with perfect courtesy. "I understand, monsieur. Yet permit me a small reflection. When a young lady sees her own likeness so convincingly that even a faithful servant mistakes one for the other, is that mere imagination?" The lines about Sir Charles's mouth tightened. Mrs. Withers has been with this household for 3 decades, but even the most loyal eyes may be deceived. In country houses, gossip grows like ivy. It spreads faster than the truth. I am determined this absurd tale must not leave these walls. Reputations, once blemished, rarely recover. "Reputation," Poirot murmured softly. "Ah, yes, a fragile treasure indeed." Sir Charles's voice hardened. "Then you will oblige me by keeping your inquiries discreet. No questions to the villagers, no whispers in the servants' hall. I will not see Greyborn Court become a subject for ridicule." Unable to restrain myself, I interjected, "But surely, Sir Charles, if Miss Harkort believes her safety is threatened—" "She believes too much," he cut in sharply, then, softening, added, "I mean only that her nerves are overwrought. Rest, quiet, and the steady guidance of family. That is all she requires." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Naturally, monsieur, you wish for tranquility. Yet one must remember, truth often disturbs before it soothes. Sir Charles gave no answer, and we withdrew. Later that morning, we encountered Leonard Westridge in the smoking room, impeccably dressed and perfectly composed, the morning paper open before him. He rose at once, charm radiating from every gesture. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, pray sit down. A cigarette, perhaps?" Poirot declined politely. "You must find our little dramas amusing," Leonard continued lightly. "A vanished double, a nervous young lady, and now the great Hercule Poirot summoned to investigate. Surely you are not disappointed by our humble stage?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "On the contrary, monsieur. One finds the actors most intriguing. You, for instance, you speak always with such assurance. But confidence, I think, can sometimes conceal unease." Leonard gave a short laugh, though it did not ring entirely true. "You imply I am nervous? Not at all. I am the most fortunate of men. Sir Charles has shown me great trust, and before long Alice will be my wife." "That," Poirot said gently, "is not yet agreed." For the briefest instant Leonard's smile faltered. He lit another cigarette, exhaling deliberately. "Alice is young, easily swayed by mood and fancy. In time she will see where her true advantage lies. Our marriage is natural, inevitable." Poirot tilted his head. "And the debts, monsieur?" Leonard laughed again, a little too quickly. "My dear Poirot, every man of spirit has debts. They are the grease that keeps the wheels of society turning. Sir Charles is aware of mine and considers them no danger." His tone was confident, but I thought it pressed a little too hard upon conviction. Poirot said no more, merely thanked him and allowed him to retreat behind his newspaper. Our last conversation of the morning was with Lady Frances. We found her in the morning room, reclining elegantly with a fashion journal, her pale fingers idly turning its pages. She looked up with that faint, mocking smile that never quite touched her eyes. "So, Monsieur Poirot, you pursue your inquiries. How industrious of you. I trust my stepdaughter has not led you too far astray?" Poirot bowed. "Mademoiselle is troubled, madame. I seek only to restore her peace of mind." "Peace of mind," Lady Frances murmured. "So desirable, so rare. Alice has always been fanciful. As a child she once swore the West Wing was haunted, burst into tears after glimpsing a figure in white. It was a maid in uniform, naturally. Such is the nature of her imagination." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "you do not deny what Mrs. Withers claimed she saw." Lady Frances gave the faintest shrug. "Mrs. Withers is devoted. Devotion may cloud the eyes. And if Alice believes she has a double, then perhaps the mind plays its tricks. The mind can be very convincing, monsieur." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "So you dismiss the matter entirely?" Her eyes met his coolly. "I neither dismiss nor affirm. I only observe that in this house discretion is survival. There are subjects, Monsieur Poirot, better left untouched." With that, she lowered her gaze to the magazine, her manner as dismissive as her husband's had been earlier. That evening, when we were finally alone, I said to Poirot, "Well, they've given you nothing. Sir Charles demands silence. Leonard insists marriage is inevitable. Lady Frances shrugs it all away. It seems a dead end to me." Poirot, seated by the fire, smiled faintly. "Ah, Hastings, you see nothing, and that is well, for it leaves me the pleasure of enlightenment. Reflect a little. Each counsels silence, yet each in a different key. Sir Charles hides behind dignity, Leonard behind urgency, Lady Frances behind detachment. 3 silences, mon ami, and not one of them the same. That, Hastings, is very instructive." He leaned closer, his expression suddenly grave. "And meanwhile, Somewhere within these walls walks the shadow of Alice Harkort herself. Chapter 5. The Matter of the Signature. The following morning brought with it the first ripple of real progress, something tangible after days of unease and hushed conversations. That shift began, curiously enough, with a letter. Mrs. Withers, as ever fiercely protective of her duties, swept in with the morning post balanced on a silver tray. Her hands trembled ever so slightly, betraying an agitation she usually concealed behind her prim efficiency. Sir Charles sorted swiftly through the envelopes until one caught his eye. He broke its seal, read the contents once, then again, slower, more deliberate this time. Carefully folding the sheet, he turned toward Alice with a gaze that carried the full weight of his authority. "You were in Maidstone yesterday, Alice," he said evenly, though the steel in his voice was unmistakable. Her eyes did not waver. "No, uncle. I was here." Without a word, Sir Charles extended the letter. "The manager of Farley and Company writes to confirm that you visited the bank yesterday afternoon and withdrew funds from your account. A modest sum, true, but the visit itself is the issue." Alice neither touched the paper nor flinched. "I did not go to Maidstone, nor did I sign anything." Leonard, languidly buttering his toast, gave a low chuckle. "Banks, my dear, are not in the habit of mistaking faces. If they say it was you, then it was you." Before Sir Charles could reply, Poirot's delicate hand intercepted the letter. "With your indulgence, monsieur." He carried it to the window where the morning light was strongest, tilting the page with care. Blue-black ink. Curious. The tail of the H extends more than usual. The downstrokes tremble where normally they are firm. A hand that mimics, but does not live within the shape. Sir Charles's jaw set hard. "Nevertheless, Alice, this requires explanation." "There is none to give," she whispered. Lady Frances, who had not so much as looked up from the pile of correspondence before her, murmured dryly, "One cannot exist in two places at once, unless of course one is a rumour." Sir Charles snapped the letter shut. "I shall go to the bank myself this morning." "And I," said Poirot smoothly, "will have the honour of accompanying you. Even a detective has his small vanities." At Farley and Company, the manager, a precise man with pale lashes and an expression polished by years of imperturbable routine, confirmed the visit without hesitation. Miss Harkort presented herself yesterday, accompanied by another lady. Withdrawn £10, perfectly proper. "May I inquire, monsieur," Poirot asked, "whether her companion was known to you?" The banker frowned slightly. "No, sir. She was plainly dressed, face half hidden by a veil." "And the signature?" demanded Sir Charles. A passbook was produced and laid beside its counterfoil. Poirot studied them under the light with obsessive care. "It is a clever forgery," he murmured. "So clever that it deceives because one wishes to believe. You trust the face before you, monsieur, and nature, alas, is not always the ally of accuracy." If the banker bristled, he concealed it behind courteous composure. Nothing further was gained. Yet fate was not done with us. On our return through the high street, the village postmistress, a broad, determined woman with a forthright manner, hailed Sir Charles with brisk familiarity. "Your young lady was in again yesterday," she said confidently. "Collected a registered parcel around 4 o'clock. Signed for it. A. Harkort." Sir Charles stopped dead. "Impossible." Poirot leaned forward, eyes bright. "Can you recall her dress, madame?" "Grey," came the immediate reply. "Neat, well made, little bunch of violets pinned at the bodice, gloves to match." "And her voice?" Poirot prompted. "Soft," the woman answered after a pause, as though she feared to be overheard. Indeed, Poirot murmured. A wise precaution, n'est-ce pas? Sir Charles said nothing for the rest of the ride, but I noticed his hand tighten on his cane until his knuckles whitened. That afternoon, Poirot requested to inspect Alice's wardrobe. Mrs. Withers, affronted but loyal, attended. He examined gowns as though they were works of art, pausing at a grey dress Alice had worn the night of our arrival. "You permit?" he asked softly. "The hem, C. Hastings, has been lengthened, pressed down, yet the old fold faintly remains. And here a hook, new thread, too pale, not the work of last season." Mrs. Withers bristled. "I altered it myself last spring." Poirot's finger hovered above the collar. "But the scent, madame. Your young mistress wears none, yet this fabric clings to perfume, heavy, modern, not suited to the taste of this household." Alice shook her head firmly. "I never use scent." Poirot bent closer. "Then it is the fragrance of another, the one who masquerades in your likeness." He lifted the hem again. "And here, a repair, but not Mrs. Withers' hand. A different stitch overlays hers. Someone else has worn this gown." Mrs. Withers's indignation faltered. "I keep the keys, sir. No one could have entered without my knowing." "Unless," said Poirot gently, "you admitted her yourself, believing her to be your mistress." The woman started as though struck. "Never. Unless—" her voice dropped. "Unless I were deceived." "Precisely," Poirot murmured. "The honest are the natural prey of deceivers." He made no mention of the faint smear of violet powder inside the cuff, nor the subtle trace of grease paint at the glove's edge, though I, watching closely, did not miss his nostrils twitch as though scenting a stage. Later that day, Dr. Crampton arrived, cheerful, florid, dispensing reassurance as easily as prescriptions. Taking Alice's wrist in his plump fingers, he said kindly, "My dear Miss Harkort, these fancies must be dismissed. A little bromide at night, some quiet. Yes, a week at St. Oswald's would restore you." "St. Oswald's?" I asked. "A private nursing establishment," he explained smoothly. "Discreet, excellent for nervous cases." Alice withdrew her hand sharply. "I will not go." Sir Charles's gaze remained stern. "You will do as I consider best, Alice." Poirot, still turning a paper knife idly in his hand, spoke without looking up. "2 certificates are required, I believe, doctor." "For what, monsieur?" Crampton replied too lightly. "For the law," Poirot said softly, "when it confuses rest with restraint." The doctor smiled, but his eyes betrayed the flicker of unease. Sir Charles, unmoved, rang the bell. "Francis, be so good as to join us." And into the room came Lady Francis, cool, poised, faintly amused, as though the whole affair were nothing more than a parlour diversion. The atmosphere inside the drawing-room was taut with unspoken tension. Sir Charles, always the embodiment of restraint, addressed Francis with grave courtesy. "Dr. Crampton believes a short stay at St. Oswald's will be best for Alice's health. I think his counsel is wise, and I intend to follow it." Lady Francis lowered her eyelids with delicate composure, her voice quiet but firm. "If you believe it best, Charles." But Alice stood tall, her defiance unmistakable. "I refuse," she said clearly, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Sir Charles, unshaken by her defiance, merely inclined his head with cold courtesy. "Your objection is duly noted, my dear. I trust that in time, reason will guide you." It was at this precise moment that Leonard Westridge arrived, overhearing the last fragment of the exchange. His tone was filled with concern. "What is this? Alice? Unwell? Why was I not told?" He moved toward her with almost exaggerated sympathy. Poirot, who had been silent until then, turned his sharp gaze upon him. Pardon me, Monsieur Westridge, but perhaps you would clarify something. At what hour were you in Maidstone yesterday? Leonard faltered, visibly startled. Maidstone? What an odd question. Around 4 o'clock, naturally. Everyone goes at 4. Poirot's moustache twitched faintly. Not everyone, monsieur, signs a false name in a hotel register. Leonard gave a forced laugh, his voice slightly too loud. This is preposterous. I will not endure such an insinuation. Sir Charles's tone rang with finality. Nor shall I. This discussion ends here. The butler appeared discreetly, interrupting the mounting storm. Sir Charles, a gentleman insists upon seeing you. He gives his name as Mr. Nash of Clark, Pierman and Nash, solicitors. Show him in, Sir Charles ordered. Mr. Nash entered, a small, precise man whose every word seemed to fall with clinical neatness. He inclined his head, his dry manner betraying no warmth. Forgive my intrusion, Sir Charles. I'm instructed to confirm whether your ward's marriage by special license is scheduled for tomorrow, according to the documentation submitted to our office yesterday. Sir Charles froze. My ward's what? He asked, his voice sharp. Marriage, Nash replied smoothly, producing a paper, between Mr. Leonard Westridge and Miss Alice Harkort. The forms bear the young lady's signature, and the license has already been paid for in cash. A silence, heavier than stone, filled the room. All eyes turned toward Leonard, who had gone pale. Sir Charles thundered, I never authorized this! Impossible! Nash, still unruffled, bowed. That is precisely why clarity is needed. The lady herself came to my office, veiled but unmistakable. She signed here. He indicated the line, Alice Harkort. Alice's voice trembled, but she spoke firmly. That is not my handwriting. Poirot, moving swiftly, plucked the document from Nash's hand and examined it minutely. His dark eyes narrowed. At last he looked up. The woman who came to you, monsieur, wore a veil. She did, and she carried with her a fragrance, Poirot murmured, a scent both overpowering and without refinement, a scent one does not forget. Sir Charles's iron control began to crack. This farce ends now. Mr. Nash, however, merely cleared his throat. Sir Charles, unless you lodge a formal objection, the license must be issued by 8 o'clock this evening. I have been instructed to deliver it in person. You will not deliver it, Sir Charles declared, his voice like steel. As you wish, but be advised, the gentleman has already secured a clergyman willing to conduct the ceremony without delay. Leonard stammered, Sir Charles, I had no knowledge. This is madness. Silence, Sir Charles cut him off. His fury was restrained but deadly. Nash withdrew as quietly as he had entered. The room seemed to vibrate with suppressed outrage. Sir Charles turned to Dr. Crampton. Prepare everything. Alice must be taken to St. Oswald's tonight. She shall not endure further disgrace. Alice recoiled, hurt flashing across her face. Poirot's voice cut through the air, calm yet firm. Patience, Sir Charles. The trap is closing, but not upon the bird you believe. Sir Charles wheeled around. What do you mean? I mean, Poirot said, that the impostor, this woman posing as Alice, has prepared every document required to become Mrs. Westridge. Meanwhile, the real Alice is to be silenced, spirited away where her protests cannot be heard. Leonard burst out, This is insufferable. He stepped forward, but Poirot's steady gaze froze him in place. Sir Charles summoned Barton for the car. By the time wheels crunched on the gravel outside, 2 strangers in dark coats had already arrived, flanking a motorcar at the steps. Lady Frances stood pale, yet composed. Dr. Crampton hovered nearby, a mask of genial calm hiding something far more calculating. Sir Charles addressed Alice with grim authority. Come quietly, child. It is for your own protection. Alice looked not at him but at Poirot. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. "Just a moment longer, mademoiselle." The butler entered, carrying a card on a tray. "A lady insists upon seeing Miss Harkort. She claims it cannot wait." "Send her away," Sir Charles snapped. But Poirot intercepted the card, his eyes flashing with sudden recognition. "No, admit her." Into the hall stepped a slender woman in a grey gown and veil, an uncanny reflection of Alice herself. When she lifted her veil, the likeness was astonishing. Alice gasped, a cry escaping her lips. The woman's gaze travelled over the gathering, settling finally on Dr. Crampton. Her voice was low, but every syllable struck like a bell. "I was promised money. They told me to take her place, and now they refuse to pay." Alice stared at her double in horror. The resemblance was chilling. The men in dark coats moved toward Alice. Dr. Crampton's smooth voice slid into the air. "This is most unfortunate." Poirot raised his hand. "Stand still, all of you. The moment of truth has arrived." And then, as though fate itself conspired with the drama, the lamps flickered and failed. A cry rang out in the half-darkness. When the light steadied, Alice was gone. Chapter 6. The Grey Lady Unmasked. The hall dissolved into pandemonium the instant the lamps flickered. Shadows jumped wildly across the oak-panelled walls, voices shouted over one another, and when order was restored with the return of light, a chill realization struck. Alice was no longer beside Poirot. In her place, rigid and unmoving, stood the veiled woman in grey. The faint gleam in her eyes, visible even beneath the half-lowered veil, was unnerving. Poirot's voice cut through the uproar like a blade. "Shut the doors! No one is to leave this room." The footman, pale and hesitant, obeyed at once. Sir Charles turned sharply, his face lined with authority but quivering with alarm. "Where is she? Where is Alice?" he demanded. A clear voice answered from above. "I am here, uncle." Every gaze lifted. Alice descended the staircase slowly, her complexion pale, yet her bearing composed. One hand rested firmly on the polished balustrade. "The lights failed, but Monsieur Poirot's instructions were precise," she said calmly. "I followed them." Sir Charles looked from his niece to Poirot, disbelief in his eyes. "Instructions? You expected this?" Poirot inclined his head. "But naturally, monsieur, one always prepares for the worst. I dispatched 2 notes last evening. One was for Inspector Graves, who even now waits at the rear with his men. The other was for Mademoiselle Alice herself, with exact guidance for such disturbances. The plotters hoped to separate her, but instead she has remained beyond their reach. And now, as you see, every player is assembled, and the victim safe." Sir Charles swung to face the mysterious woman in grey. "Then who in God's name is this?" With a sudden defiant motion, the impostor cast back her veil. A collective murmur ran through the room. The likeness to Alice was startling, the same fair hair, the same delicate features, yet coarser somehow, touched with bitterness. "I am the one they promised to pay," she declared harshly. "They trained me to copy her handwriting, her speech, even her manner. I was told there would be money once I played my part. But now they would cast me aside with nothing." Her voice rang with resentment, and instinctively every eye turned toward Leonard Westridge and Dr. Crampton. Leonard's lips trembled, drained of colour, while the doctor maintained an outward genial smile, though it was clearly strained. Poirot stepped forward. "Voilà! The Phantom of Greyborn, no spirit from the grave, but an actress. A woman of the stage, skilled in imitation. Dr. Crampton brought her here. She was seen at the bank, at the solicitor's office, even in the village post. All the while, Monsieur Lénard provided the urgency, for his debts demanded fortune, and marriage was the swiftest key. "That is a foul invention," Leonard broke in hoarsely, but the woman in grey laughed harshly. "Lies, you say? It was you who slipped me the notes, you who promised I'd be well rewarded when the vows were spoken." Sir Charles recoiled in horror. "Leonard," Poirot turned to me with quiet emphasis, "and you see, Hastings, money was not the only fuel. Dr. Crampton's true hunger was power. He had guided Sir Charles for years, whispered counsel into every uncertainty. But with Alice, mistress of Greyborn, another doctor might be summoned, another voice listened to. That authority, he could not bear to lose." The doctor's mask cracked. His voice trembled with anger. "For 2 decades I have steered this household. Without me, Charles would have been helpless. And now to be cast aside for a fanciful girl? Never." Alice shrank back, stricken. "You would have locked me away for life, just to keep your influence?" Poirot's eyes gleamed sharply. "Mademoiselle, the malady was never in you, but in him. Ambition, that is the disease." He turned, his voice rising with measured precision. "The signature forged, but too flawless. The gown altered, but by a clumsy hand, not Mrs. Withers. The perfume, cheap, vulgar, unworthy of Alice. And always, the voice subdued, lest the true difference betray her. My friends, the smallest details, they cannot be disguised. The little grey cells see what others overlook." At that moment, Inspector Graves strode in, 2 constables at his back. He gave a brisk nod to Poirot. "We have the woman's full confession. She has named both Leonard Westridge and Dr. Crampton." Leonard staggered, his composure shattered. "It was Crampton! He orchestrated everything!" The doctor wheeled on him with fury. "You needed the money, you fool!" Poirot raised a commanding hand. "Enough! The farce is finished!" The impostor flung out her arms dramatically. "I was promised money. I risked everything. What else could I do? I claim what was owed me." "Payment you will not have," Graves replied curtly. He gestured, and the constables stepped forward. Poirot inclined his head. "Exit, madam. Your role is ended." Veil lowered once more. The woman was led away, her heels echoing across the marble floor long after her figure had vanished. Alice recoiled as though chilled. "To think she could look so much like me!" Poirot turned to her gently. "Resemblance, mademoiselle, is not identity. That cannot be stolen." Graves signalled again, and Leonard, cursing under his breath, was seized. The doctor sputtered in protest, but was likewise taken into custody. Sir Charles, white and broken, at last found words. His voice was rough with remorse. "Alice, I would have sent you away. I believed it was for your own good. God forgive me. I see now it would have destroyed you." Alice's voice trembled but carried the weight of truth. "Uncle, I could have borne your anger, even your reproach, but not your disbelief." Chapter 7. The Prison of Mistrust. "You were willing to think me unbalanced," Alice whispered, her voice trembling but resolute, "when all I ever sought was your faith." Sir Charles's shoulders sagged beneath the weight of her words. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and hoarse, stripped of all authority. "Alice, I cannot undo what has passed, but I see now. I owe you more than words can repay." Poirot's sharp eyes softened, his tone carrying quiet insistence. "No, monsieur. You owe her only this, that from this moment forward, you place your confidence in her. She has shown strength enough to carry any household." Alice said nothing, though her eyes glistened in the lamplight. Lady Frances, who had lingered with an air of detached amusement, rose languidly, her smile faint, almost mocking. "Well, Charles," she murmured, stretching like a cat. "At least the days ahead promise a touch more excitement. Greyborn may no longer be so very dull." Poirot's gaze turned upon her, stern as a magistrate's. "Madame, indifference is a privilege easily lost. I would urge you to abandon it." She only shrugged, her silken skirts whispering across the floor as she swept out of the hall, leaving silence in her wake. 2 days later, as Hastings and Poirot prepared to leave Greyborn Court, Alice came to them. She looked calmer now, her composure restored, though her face bore the shadow of recent trials. "Monsieur Poirot," she said simply, "I cannot ever thank you enough. You have not only preserved my inheritance, you have preserved me." Poirot bowed low over her hand, his moustaches quivering in gentle gravity. "Mademoiselle, your true fortune is not counted in coin or estate. It is yourself, the courage, the spirit, the independence, that is your greatest treasure. Guard it, for it is beyond price." As our car rolled away down the long beach-lined drive, Greyborn Court shrinking into mist behind us, I could not help turning to my friend. "You were magnificent, Poirot. Yet I confess, I should never have suspected Dr. Crampton." A spark of amusement lit his eyes. "Precisely, mon cher Hastings. You never suspect, and that is why you are indispensable to me." With that enigmatic remark, he closed his eyes and composed himself, every hair of his moustaches immaculate, while the grey turrets of Greyborn disappeared into the autumn haze. Epilogue. Several weeks later, I dined with Poirot in our rooms at Whitehaven. A gentle rain pattered against the window panes, the fire glowing warmly at our backs. Poirot, resplendent in his evening dress, regarded a single grape on his plate as though it concealed a riddle only he could untangle. The affair of Greyborn Court had concluded, but its echoes lingered. Leonard Westridge had stood trial at the assizes and received a sentence of penal servitude. Dr. Crampton, disgraced and stripped of his practice, faced imprisonment and public ruin, his name henceforth synonymous with betrayal in a black coat. The mysterious woman in grey was unmasked as a provincial actress, skilled in mimicry, her testimony damning enough to seal the fate of both her employers. As for Sir Charles Harkort, the ordeal left him visibly aged. His hair had turned more silver, his step slowed. Yet reconciliation with Alice softened his decline. More than once they were seen strolling through the village, his frail hand resting gently on her arm, as though he had at last recognized her worth. The villagers whispered that the young mistress had brought light back to the old house. Lady Frances, restless and unrepentant, departed for the continent almost at once. Whispers placed her first on the Riviera, then in Vienna, her life continuing as a sequence of glittering soirees and whispered scandals. Greyborn Court, for her, had always been little more than a backdrop upon which to play her languid part. Alice remained at Greyborn. No longer merely the ward of her uncle, she stood at last as mistress of her fortune and her fate. The bitterness of her ordeal had tempered her spirit, leaving her stronger, more assured. She who had nearly been silenced now commanded respect. I remarked as much to Poirot that night. He regarded me keenly, his fingers steepled. "Mon ami Hastings, there is but one prison from which escape is truly difficult." "And what prison is that?" I asked. "The prison of mistrust," he replied softly. Sir Charles, in his desire to protect, failed to trust. He sought to shield his ward, when all she needed was the chance to stand tall. It is a common error, yet it nearly destroyed her. Happily, Mademoiselle Alice was strong enough to endure and to triumph. That, Hastings, is why I admire her. His expression softened into a rare, almost tender smile. "The little grey cells can unmask deceit, mon ami. but only the heart can restore faith. That was the true victory of Greyborn. I could add no more. Outside, the rain whispered against the glass, but within, the lamps burned brightly, and the case of Greyborn Court slipped quietly into history. Here's a chapter-by-chapter analysis of the silent signature. Chapter 1. The Lady on the Platform. The opening scene at Charing Cross introduces Alice Harkort, a young woman whose anxious demeanor immediately catches Poirot's attention. Though she vanishes into the crowd, her reappearance a week later, pleading for Poirot's help, establishes the mystery. She fears for her life. What we learn: this chapter sets the foundation of suspicion, presenting Alice as both vulnerable and central to the coming intrigue. Poirot's sharp eye reminds us that appearances always tell a deeper story. Theme: fear often speaks before words do. Anxiety can be a signal of hidden danger. Viewer. Question: if you saw someone who looked terrified in a public space, would you dismiss it or feel compelled to act? Chapter 2. The Confession of Miss Harkort. Alice reveals her identity and backstory, ward of Sir Charles Harcourt, pressured into marriage with Leonard Westridge, and stalked by a mysterious double who impersonates her. A note warns that her life is in danger, heightening the stakes. What we learn: the chapter layers classic Christie-style intrigue, imposters, inheritance, and threats from within the family circle. Alice's double suggests a plot carefully crafted to erase her. Theme: identity, once stolen, threatens one's freedom. Vigilance is the shield against manipulation. Viewer. Question: how would you prove your identity if someone convincingly took your place? Chapter 3. Greyborn Court. Poirot and Hastings arrive at Greyborn Court. The house radiates unease as Sir Charles dismisses Alice's fears. Leonard displays arrogance and entitlement, and Lady Frances cloaks her detachment in charm. A chilling twist emerges when the housekeeper claims she saw Alice in two places at once. What we learn: doubt and denial govern the household. Poirot perceives that silence and dismissal are not signs of peace, but symptoms of something darker at work. Theme: authority without trust blinds itself to truth. Viewer. Question: do you think families sometimes protect their reputation more fiercely than their own members? Chapter 4. Private Conversations. Poirot probes each figure privately. Sir Charles demands silence, Leonard hides his debts beneath charm, and Lady Frances trivializes Alice's fears. Each avoids truth differently, exposing layers of concealment. Poirot notes these different silences as clues. What we learn: suppression is itself a confession. When people refuse to engage, they reveal the very fears they try to bury. Theme: silence speaks louder than words, but the tones of silence reveal intent. Viewer. Question: which do you find more suspicious, loud denial or calm detachment? Chapter 5. The Matter of the Signature. Forgery becomes the smoking gun. Alice's name appears on bank withdrawals, postal records, and even marriage documents. Poirot identifies subtle differences in handwriting, perfume, and tailoring, pointing to an impostor who has been living her double life. A marriage license for Alice and Leonard is uncovered, proving the conspiracy. What we learn: deception operates not through one bold act, but through many small, consistent lies. Poirot recognizes the danger. Alice is to be erased legally and socially, while the impostor takes her place. Theme: paper and ink can be as dangerous as weapons when truth is twisted into lies. Viewer. Question: would you trust official documents absolutely, or would you question even what's written in black and white? Chapter 6. The Grey Lady Unmasked. The climax erupts when Alice's double appears, exposing herself as an actress hired to impersonate her. Poirot reveals Leonard's debts and Dr. Crampton's lust for influence as the true motives behind the plot. Inspector Graves arrives to secure confessions, and the conspiracy collapses. What we learn: every disguise cracks under scrutiny. Imitation cannot withstand truth. Betrayal within the household proves far more dangerous than enemies outside. Theme: ambition, when unchecked, corrupts love, loyalty, and even medicine meant to heal. Viewer, question: do you think greed for money or hunger for power is more dangerous? Chapter 7. The Prison of Mistrust. With the culprits arrested, reconciliation follows. Sir Charles admits his failure to trust Alice, while Poirot reframes the real victory, not just saving her fortune, but restoring her dignity. What we learn: trust is the cornerstone of family bonds. Without it, love becomes control, and protection becomes imprisonment. Theme: the hardest prison to escape is not stone walls, but mistrust. Viewer, question: which do you think is harder to rebuild once broken, wealth or trust? Let's discuss key characters. In The Silent Signature, each character plays a carefully crafted role that feeds into the central mystery. Hercule Poirot stands as the master detective, observing the smallest details and unraveling the conspiracy with his methodical brilliance, while Captain Hastings provides loyal companionship and narration, grounding the case in human emotion. Alice Harkort emerges as the heart of the story, the young woman targeted by a plot to erase her identity, her vulnerability driving the urgency of the investigation. Sir Charles Harkort, her guardian, embodies authority clouded by denial, his failure to believe Alice nearly costing her everything. Leonard Westridge serves as the calculating suitor, his charm hiding crushing debts and a ruthless ambition that makes him central to the scheme. Lady Frances Harkort represents indifference masked as elegance, her dismissal of Alice's fears revealing the family's fractured loyalty. Dr. Crampton, ostensibly a figure of trust, reveals a darker side, manipulating circumstances to serve his hunger for influence. The imposter, Alice's double, becomes the chilling embodiment of deception, a tool used to legally and socially erase her true identity. Inspector Graves steps in at the climax, embodying the hand of justice that secures confessions and restores order. Together, this cast of characters illustrates how trust, betrayal, and ambition weave a web in which appearances deceive, and only truth, revealed through persistence, can set the innocent free. My final thoughts. At its core, The Silent Signature is not only a tale of forgery and deceit, but also a reflection on how fragile identity can become when trust is absent. Alice's struggle shows that silence and dismissal can be as dangerous as open threats, while Poirot's clarity reminds us that truth, once revealed, cannot be buried by lies. The downfall of Leonard, Crampton, and the imposter underscores the inevitable collapse of schemes built on greed and ambition, while the restoration of Alice's dignity highlights resilience in the face of betrayal. It is a story where appearances crumble, loyalties are tested, and justice prevails through patience and intellect. If this unraveling of mystery intrigued you, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into classic detective tales and share your thoughts below. After all, the best stories live on through the discussions they inspire. Thank you.